This is Big Girl Pants Podcast,
where we talk about women, health, power, and wealth.
hosted by
April Melton.
and Kimberly Shapiro.
We are real women with real jobs doing real life.
Join us while we showcase inspirational stories and inspirational people.
Come on, y'all. Put your big girl pants on and stay tuned.
5,
4,
3,
2.
1.
Hi.
Hey,
Welcome.
back.
Yeah.
So this time we have a guest, and it's so exciting. We cannot wait to tell you guys what this is about.
Oh my God, I'm so pumped.
Yeah.
So, actually, the gentleman who we rent this studio space from, who runs the studio here, Keith, he called me one day and he said, "Hey."
Oh, this is the introduction. I didn't make that connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he said, "Hey, I'm recording an audiobook for someone right now, and I think he would be a really great guest on your podcast." I was like, "Shoot, what's up?" And he said he wrote a book about birth control and the effects on women's bodies and birth control. And I was like, "Oh my God, I am so down." And he had no idea at the time, but Matt and I, my husband, have been trying to get pregnant since last November. And I've had 2 children previously, but this time between my last child and now is the only time in my life I've ever been on birth control. So we're experiencing some, I don't want to say infertility, but it's been challenging to get pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, how perfect. Because I'm the guinea pig on the podcast. So we always use my life as an example of everything, all the shit shows.
Right.
But when he told me that, I was like, absolutely, I would love to talk about this, because I don't think in America, in the United States, we know enough about our bodies to know when we can and can't get pregnant, right? When we ovulate, what our cycles look like. We're not educated about it
Not at all.
right?
Right.
Everybody just treats women's periods like we're just going to brush it under the table, whatever. So I was like, number one, yes. Number two, our listeners would absolutely just eat this up. And I told you this on the phone too after we spoke, I've always been kind of a contrarian, like I go against the grain. And I have never thought that birth control was something that you should be on for an extended period of time. Some girls have been on it for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, whatever. By the time they try to have children, and then they're like, well, why can't I get pregnant? So your name is Mike Gaskins, and you wrote the book In the Name of the Pill. And this is for everyone who's listening. I'm just going to cover up my
I'm buying the
face real
book
quick.
in case anybody wonders
Shapiro's
what I'm
right.
doing. Like right now.
And it's so funny that I'm the one who read it, because Shapiro is the one that has a library at her house, and she not only reads physical books, but she also listens to audiobooks.
At the same
she's
time.
like, what do you call that? She's like just like the most scholastically
I would just say I'm a
inclined person.
voracious reader.
Voracious
reader.
But I am going to read the back, and just so that people who are listening can kind of get a little bit of a feel for what the book is about, and then we'll really dive into it.
Sounds great.
Birth control pills are dangerous, and the public has not been given all the facts about them. Edmund Kassouf, medical doctor. It's staggering that for a drug that is being used by 80% of women, there is so little information about the long-term safety. That is really incredible. Ernst Reitzschel, medical doctor. 50 years passed between the time Dr. Kassouf and Dr. Reitzschel expressed their concerns for hormonal birth control. The decades between saw the pill linked to ailments as diverse as breast cancer, lupus, thyroid disease, blood clots, infertility, diabetes, suicide, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, migraines, stroke, heart disease, and hair loss. This book examines the powerful forces that came together to give us birth control before it was proven safe, exposes the deceptive tactics used to keep us in the dark, and explores the numerous chronic and deadly ways women's health has been sacrificed in the name of the pill.
Right.
And your name, so Mike Gaskins. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, where you come from, and then what drove you to write a book like this.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a media writer producer.
Okay.
As my background, I do a lot of video work. And yeah, it's funny because you think about the book and the subject matter, and you think about my bio.
Just the cover.
Yeah.
Like I would pick this up and be like, "Oh, girl wrote this."
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and it's funny because my bio doesn't fit. I'm a writer producer.
Which also gives you more of an edge. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that. And so that's the thing. But also, it was one of the biggest hurdles for me because as I started getting into this, that was one of the things I kept telling myself was like, okay, you're not a medical professional and you're not a girl, so what business do you have talking about this?
Who are you and why are you talking about
Right.
this?
Exactly. But it was all self-imposed.
Right.
You know, I was the one stopping myself, and I just assumed people would feel the same way. But so I'll start how I got interested in it. So if you go back to my backstory, when my wife and I were young and we were dating, she went to the doctor for something. I can't even recall what it was, but they started talking about our relationship, and the doctor put her on the pill. And for us, it was great because we hated condoms, and it was like, oh, this is a perfect solution.
Yeah.
And of course, neither of us really thought about questioning the safety because it's been on the market for decades.
Right.
So I think it was second, third month, something like that. I was with her when she opened up the package and the little pamphlet fell out on the floor. And I opened it up and started looking at it. I was like, oh my gosh, did the doctor talk about all these side effects with you? And she was like, what side effects? You know, this kind of thing. And I was looking through, and because of her family history, I was like, I'm really concerned about this. And so we talked about it, and I was like, okay, look, I can't tell you what to do, but if this means we have one less day together at the end of our lives, it's not worth it for me. And she was just, you could see the relief wash over her face. She was like, oh my gosh, I'm so, she's, I haven't felt like myself since I started taking these. And, so it was like, all right, let's not do it. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So then that's it. Why does this, the discussion ends there? You know,
Right.
you don't think about, I didn't think about my sisters. I didn't think about anybody else in my family.
Sure.
I had resolved, and even as a man, you think, is it even my place to discuss this with my wife?
Right.
It's her decision. It's her body and all that. So even that's, that's what society has taught us. Even that's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, everything's uncomfortable in America. We can't talk about it anymore. Are you kidding?
Yeah, that's very true. So several years passed, probably decades, and I was working on a show. It was a medical conference on autoimmune diseases, and the keynote speaker on the first night was Dr. Noel Rose from Johns Hopkins University. And he's called the father of autoimmune disease. He gave it the name autoimmune disease. He was studying Hashimoto's thyroiditis in rabbits in the late 50s and came up with this idea of the body's immune system attacking itself.
Right.
I'm sorry if I'm
Is that
going
the
to stop me.
Epstein-Barr? Does it have something to do with Epstein-Barr? Do you know what that is?
Epstein-Barr is an autoimmune disease.
Well, it says, I was just looking through because I was trying to find the right chapter, but it's chapter 16, an introduction to autoimmune disease. And that kind of starts your chapters on different autoimmune or disorders.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so that's where my interest really took off because as he was talking, so he was covering kind of broad strokes of autoimmunity for all these doctors who were there for continuing medical education. And he said, we've known from the beginning estrogen plays a key role in autoimmune diseases because of the role it plays in a woman's immune system. And then he described how we have these T cells, right, that are like the soldiers of the immune system.
Right.
And our natural estrogen attaches to the receptors on these cells. And so now the soldier's armed and it has its marching orders.
Right.
But when chemicals get in our body and mimic natural estrogen, they attach to those same receptors. And so now the soldier's armed, but it doesn't know what to attack because it's not your natural estrogen. So it just starts attacking whatever, and a lot of times that becomes healthy tissue, in your body, and it'll attack, and it precipitates into an autoimmune disease. So as I didn't know about endocrine disruptors at the time. So as he's talking about that, I thought, well, what mimics natural estrogen? He has to be talking about birth control.
Right.
And so I Google, rise of autoimmune diseases, and I see since like the early 70s, all these diseases have taken off.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, why don't we hear more about this? Because I assumed this was well known in the medical community. So what really knocked my socks off was after it was over, I went up to talk to him, and I said, so exactly how what role does birth control play in all this? And he said, oh, none at all. And I was baffled.
You're like, skirt.
Hold on. You're like,
Exactly.
Wait, how is that true?
Right. It's like that's counterintuitive based on everything you've just said. And he said, no, there's never been any evidence linking it to birth control. And I was like, wow, okay. I believed him. He's the father of autoimmune disease. But I was still, it's like, this doesn't make sense. So I got back to my hotel room that night and I just picked lupus. I Googled lupus plus oral contraceptives. And I found an article on a new study that showed that women who take birth control are 50% more likely to develop lupus. And I thought, wow, okay, it's a pretty new study. Maybe Dr. Rose doesn't know about it. I'm going to look for him tomorrow at the conference and tell him about it. But then I get halfway through the article, and there's a quote from him saying this doesn't mean women should stop taking birth control. And so I was angry, and looking back on it now, I realize I was probably going through what a lot of women go through with feeling like being gaslighted. It's like, all right, he was lying to me. Why? What motivation would he have to lie to me about? And going through all those what's going on here kind of things.
Yeah. Well, and is he lying, or does he just not believe it? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. And I think in the book I said, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, it's like, okay, maybe he thought I was a simpleton and it was easier just to say, no, there's never been any proof.
Sure.
But at the same time, you flat out told me there had never been any connection.
Right.
And there's a quote from you in this article, so I know you know
like,
about the connection.
How can you consciously say and combat that something with those statistics? 50% of women who take oral contraceptives are more likely to get lupus, or women who have lupus, 50% of them took birth control.
Right.
And you're not doing a study on that?
Right.
Like, why not?
But
you're the father.
Question.
You're the father of autoimmune disease. Like, what?
Right.
So there's contributing factors. You're not investigating those contributing factors?
Right. And it's not just lupus. As you start digging into other autoimmune diseases,
Crohn's,
you see
everything.
Right.
Yeah. Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
Hypothyroidism.
So many.
Right.
Yeah.
And because we're constantly told, that there's no connection or whatever. And even, one of the things I'll still hear a lot of time from women who clearly just the timing and everything, you have to at least take into consideration that, okay, maybe the birth control did have something to do with me developing this autoimmune disease. But then women will go to their doctor and the doctor says, well, no, autoimmunity is genetic. So it wasn't caused by your pill. It's like, okay, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
It is, autoimmune diseases are genetic.
Right.
You do need to be genetically predisposed, but
your predisposition causation doesn't always
right,
equal correlation.
Exactly.
Like correlation doesn't equal causation.
And even one of the things Dr. Rose made very clear in that night I heard him speak was that, yes, it's genetic, but it's environmental triggers that are key to initiating this diseases.
What did you say, like 90% of illnesses are environmentally, like that
diet and environment.
Diet, environment, lifestyle, etc.
Yeah,
yes, I would say so.
You could even say, you could say breast cancer is genetic, right? Because family history plays a big role in it, right?
Yeah.
I got a big stank eye towards that. I think that the percentage that you will get breast cancer based on genetics alone is very, very small. Again, lifestyle choices, diet.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to discount the possibility of birth control playing a role, you could say, well, it's more genetics or other environmental factors, which tends to be the case a lot of times as well.
And also lines pockets of some very...
So here's a quick little story,
Yes.
not exactly around birth control, but autoimmune. So when I was 20 years old, I think you know this, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And my diet was, consisted of, back in the day when I was, poor, mac and cheese, ramen noodles, you name it, whatever I could afford to eat, right? Hot dogs chopped up in my mac and cheese, because that was super, Oh, and
Beanie Weenies, delicious.
I always say I had a Coke addiction, like
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. I was addicted to Coca-Cola. And my diet was just atrocious. It was horrible. And then, so I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I was told that it would be a challenge for me to not be heavily medicated and possibly even in a wheelchair by the time I was in my 40s. It was that aggressive and that bad. So I started doing research and I changed my diet. I'd say by the time I was 23, I was pretty adamant, maybe 24, where I was super clean eater. I got healthy. I stopped drinking Coke. I didn't, very, very healthy. By the time I was 32, when I went to, it took some years, but by the time I was 32 and I went to my rheumatologist, he's like, I don't need to see you anymore. And I haven't, I'm
that's crazy.
45 now, and I have never had an issue. I've not been medicated. I've not needed, I was back when I was 20, but I haven't needed any sort of assistance. Fast forward, I had a hysterectomy 2 years ago, and I was 43. I was a little bit nervous that, oh crap, what does that mean for me from a hormone perspective? I'm so young, and I don't agree with hormone replacement. So a synthetic hormone replacement. And so I was like, God, what does that mean? I'm so scared. So I did a lot of research and learned again about, this is when I stopped using regular makeup, and I stopped burning candles in my house, and I stopped using deodorant, cleaning. I've used deodorant, it's just all natural. But every single thing that I use in my home or put on my body or clean with is natural.
Yeah.
Just because of the impact of these environmental factors. And you can't obviously eliminate all of it. Just walking outside or living in your home, you're going to be exposed. But I think just reducing. So it's coupled with, it's along the same lines, but just not birth control.
Yeah, it's absolutely along the same lines. And I've had that conversation with many women because surprisingly, there are a lot of women that'll, they're looking at the labels to see what's in things, and they're avoiding hormones in their meat and this and that, and trying to reduce their hormonal impact, but then they're taking birth control every day. Think about what you're doing.
Straight
These are
shot.
very potent.
Do you know that's what my doctor wanted me to do, was to go on birth control before I had my hysterectomy.
Right.
He's like, well, we need to put you on birth control. I'm like, I am not putting that in my body at the age, not that anybody should, but at the age of 43,
right,
definitely don't need that.
Yeah.
So
that's another, doctors do that all the time. Young women who come in and express this fear of, I heard that, these risks are, the chance of this or this risk or whatever. And the doctors constantly tell them, well, as long as you're under 35 and you don't smoke, then you're fine.
Yeah.
But then they go to women who are over 35 and they say, well, here, let me put you on birth control. It's like, what happened to, as long as you're under 35, you don't have anything
Exactly. He was so quick to give me that prescription. And I'm like, I refuse to take it.
Right.
So we need a plan B.
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of women don't even know. They're just going to do what their doctors tell them to do, and they're not going to do any research.
Right. And I think that's one of the big hang-ups. And that's why it's so devastating for women too, because when women go in and they're telling their doctor, hey, I started noticing these symptoms, and the doctor's saying, well, I've never seen that before, or it couldn't be your birth control, or just give your body
Definitely
time to adjust.
Definitely got to be something else.
Yeah.
Right. But we have this kind of thing where, what other product do you have where you're so reliant on someone outside of you making that decision for you, and you just do it? The purchaser and the decision maker are two different.
Right.
The person who's taking it and the decision maker are two different people.
Yeah.
But the doctor really isn't sacrificing anything. If the consequence is good or bad, you're the one who's going to have to live with them.
Yeah.
But we put this complete trust in the doctors, and there's this...
Who we see for about 30 seconds, mind you.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's this complete disconnect. And so many doctors nowadays don't even take the Hippocratic Oath. Most people don't know that. You assume the doctor has taken an oath to first do no harm.
Do no harm.
But many doctors don't take the oath anymore. So, and I'm not saying they're intentionally trying to cause harm, but there's, again, it's kind of this disconnect.
Gray area.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I also believe that just because you take an oath doesn't mean you honor an oath.
That's true.
Forever.
So,
That's
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And even going in with the best intentions, right? That doesn't mean that people can't be persuaded by other outlets.
Right.
Or influences.
Or I have a quote in the book from Upton Sinclair who said, it's hard to get a man to see something when his salary depends on his not seeing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had an OBGYN tell me that the reason it's so hard for doctors in her specialty to say anything bad about birth control is because it represents about a third of their business. It's hard to see something bad when
It's so funny that you say that, because there's a lady that I follow on Instagram, and her handle is Dr. Fit and Fabulous, and she's an obstetrician and gynecologist, and she is a very large advocate of like the keto diet and being very mindful of what you eat and taking care of your hormones via diet. And I sent her this book, and I sent her like a bunch of excerpts from the book. She was like, yeah, the sad thing is that people just don't know. She's like, this information is not new, but anybody who touts this or spreads this risks losing their license, right?
Right.
To practice medicine. Number one. Number two, like discussing this with women impacts their business so largely that they're not incentivized to do it.
Right.
Why would they?
And then then I want to beg the question, well, why are you in this industry in the first place? Was it money or was it to help people?
But it's like, I don't think any doctor, of course, the financial motivation is there, right? If I go to medical school, which is an investment,
Sure.
9 to 15 years of your life,
Sure.
including residency, etc., goes in to say, yes, I'm going to have a nice life because I'm going to make money, but I'm also going to help people. Like there are some doctors who go in and say, I'm vicious and I don't care. I just want to prescribe medications and get some kickbacks from the big pharmaceutical companies. You know what I mean? Like I want a yacht. Right. So I'm going to go in and me and GSK are going to be best friends. I don't think that's what they do, but I think that once they see that and they get a taste of it, it's very hard to go back from that.
Right.
Or when you see, it's kind of like, which I want to get to this too, and I don't know how you feel about it, but if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, it's fine. It's kind of like the whole COVID thing. Like so many doctors are going along with Fauci and what he's saying because they don't want to rock the boat or they don't want to go against what's mainstream, right? But then you have the outliers who are like, absolutely not. This is not true. This is not what's going on at all. This has been my livelihood for my life. This is something that I spent the entirety of my career studying, and what they're saying is absolutely incorrect.
Yeah, and some of them are losing their licenses and
exactly. So it's like, what is the risk there? And pharmaceutical companies have a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of lawyers and like.
And they've been working on this game plan for decades, so they've got it down.
Exactly.
I saw an article. I guess it was sometime late last year. It was something like 10 pariahs in the medical field to avoid during COVID or something like that. And they had these 10 doctors. And it was funny going through and reading their bios and how, formerly highly respected doctor such and such. It's like, so this doctor was really highly respected until he disagreed with you on COVID.
He stopped playing your game.
Yeah.
He stopped playing your game.
Right.
Oh, okay. So now he's not. We're just completely strip him of everything.
Right.
All validity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's alarming.
It's scary. But that also goes along with birth control.
Yeah.
Because they're not incentivized to talk about what the effects are.
Right.
They're not incentivized to educate women on how impactful our cycles are and how much it controls of like everything. I've noticed like even just being more mindful after reading this book, but I've noticed the changes in my body and reading more about our periods and how we're affected by so many different things by our cycle. I mean, it's like a game changer. And if more women were educated on what their cycle was and how infrequent you can actually get pregnant during the month. Because, I mean, if you think about it, like I'm taking birth control because I don't want to get pregnant because I'm not ready or I'm not at the time where I want to get pregnant, or my gynecologist tells me to take birth control for my skin or regulate my hormones or not have a period, which is great, right? Like, let's be real. No woman wants to bleed for 3 to 7 days a month. Nobody wants that.
Right.
It's so inconvenient.
No, nobody wants that.
No.
When they offered me a hysterectomy, I'm like, sign me up.
Sold. I'm done. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to deal with tampons or pads or cups or whatever, right? Like, none of us.
Right.
But the side effects from birth control, and I can say this now because I had the Mirena, which is a 5-year IUD, removed last November, and the shift in acne, in weight, I lost weight after I took out my IUD, and this is after I've lost 60 pounds with the IUD, so it was like those 20 pounds that were still hanging on from the hormones. The acne, the mood changes, the mood swings.
So it got better once you removed it?
Oh my gosh.
Worse?
Better.
Okay.
But the mood swings and from like, I would say probably the withdrawals of hormones from removing it were insane.
Because birth control is like a common go-to for doctors and teenagers, not for birth control, but for acne.
Right.
Acne.
Yeah. It's like a common prescription for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many things that make my brain want to explode. But going back through, I thought of like 10 different things while you were saying that.
Bring it on.
So I started this birth control group on Facebook that we're just shy of 4,000 members now. But
what's it called? I want to join it.
Straight Talk About Birth Control.
Great.
I'm going to find that right now.
Yeah, find it.
And so I've seen several women on there share pictures, like before and after pictures with the IUD. It's like, oh my gosh,
they
I had
blew
no
up?
idea. No, they lost weight.
Oh, after they took it out.
After they took it out, right. Because you don't think about, I mean, one of the doctors really don't know exactly how the IUD works, but whether it's the copper IUD or like Mirena or whatever that has hormone in it, one of the key, I guess, mechanisms of the IUD is it basically activates your immune system. Mm-hmm. So it creates this infection in your uterus, essentially, where you have all these white blood cells that are
there. Yeah.
So it makes an unpleasant environment for semen, right? So,
which like probably changes the pH levels
right
in your cervix so that the sperm can't live on top of, like, the copper IUD is going to kill the sperm, right? Like on site.
Plus the infection, plus the the white blood cells and everything will kill foreign invaders or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, but you've basically got this constant immunity thing going on with your immune system down there, and
in your vagina,
right? And
that's
so
fun.
that inflammation doesn't stay localized.
No.
It affects your system,
right?
So a lot of women, they're amazed when they take it out, and
I got this like chin strap of acne. It was the worst.
When you had it, or
when I had it.
When you had it, okay.
Yes, it was awful.
I
could never make it go away.
So overwhelmed with guilt right now, and we'll talk about that with my daughter. But Carrie, I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but I do want to jump back and talk about
this is just
her.
Education, no guilt.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, it's fun. The IUD is one of those things for me. That's part of why I'm doing the audio book here in the same studio as well. I've had a lot of women tell me over the last couple of years that nobody reads anymore. Please make it available on audiobook. but also, like, right after the book came out, I had so many women contact. I was blown away. Asking me, please write about these different LARCs, long-acting. So IUDs, depot shot, the implants. Women were like, nobody's talking about these. Please write about these.
Yeah.
And so I've included a little more on the audio version I'm doing
perfect.
as well.
I can't wait.
But yeah, I kind of fell into the same camp. It's funny because when I think about my birth control journey, it's like I really feel like I've gone along the same path a lot of women have gone along. When the book came out, I was kind of under the assumption probably the copper IUD was the safest thing you could do.
That's where I was too. I thought so too.
But then I was blown away by all these women saying, no, join this Facebook group and you start reading. Yeah, you start reading all of. It's like, oh, well, yeah, why didn't I even...
We probably shouldn't even have said the name of the Facebook group because now they're going to shut it down. Pharmaceutical companies are going to be like, no, you can't talk about that.
Yeah, cancel culture, man.
The reason I started it was because I had written several articles, and I think it was before the book came out. I joined a couple of Facebook groups just trying to see what kinds of things women were experiencing.
So and I didn't ask you this before, but when did that start? When did you go to that conference where you heard him speak?
That, I believe, it was 2015.
Oh, okay. So 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
So you kind of alluded to this earlier when you said your wife was put on birth control. Mm-hmm. You read the pamphlet. You're like, holy crap, did you even know about all these side effects? And that kind of started the journey? I mean, was it really just that?
I mean, that had to be a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah,
or do you have daughters?
It was a long time ago. I didn't have daughters at the time. I have daughters now,
okay.
So obviously the fight is even more important to me. But for me that was just me and her. That was like.
I mean, most people don't just pick up a torch like that and run with it.
Right.
But see,
but he didn't. Because how long ago was that?
That was probably 25 years past.
Okay, that's just where it sparked. Okay.
Well, I see. It didn't even spark. Okay. That was a conversation between me and my wife, and I didn't really think about it again.
Okay.
And talk about being consumed by guilt. It's like, why didn't I think about this?
Right.
And why? And that's one of the arguments I make in the book. Once you know this information, I think you're almost obligated. Definitely, your responsibilities change. You need to tell. And especially when you're dealing with autoimmune disease or breast cancer, you need to tell the other women in your family about it, because especially if they're not on birth control yet, you might be able to protect them from whatever. But yeah, it's one of those things that really it wasn't until my wife always talks about how just I am almost to a fault, but it was that sense of justice when I heard the doctor talking, and then when I figured out he had lied to me, I was like,
denying.
Okay, this is wrong. This is wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So that happened with your wife way back in the day, 25 years ago, and then you went to that. You were working the conference, and you heard him say that, and then it just like the light bulb went off.
Okay.
Right. And before we get too far away from it, I want to go back to what we were talking about, the doctors. Like, I do think most doctors are sincere and they do want to help their patients.
Yes.
But I think one of the things that probably influences the way they react more, and I don't think as highly of OBGYNs as I used to, but I want to give them a little bit of an out. And I feel like one of the biggest things was probably the Dole Act in the 80s, which changed the landscape.
And for those people who are listening, you should expound on that a little bit,
Yes.
because if they don't know what it is.
So Bob Dole was
don't
one of
know.
the co-sponsors, and it basically shifted the paradigm between like medical schools, research institutions, and drug companies, and basically put them in bed together. So after the Bay-Dole Act, researchers at universities can profit. They can hold patents on drugs or things that lead to the development of drugs, and so they're in bed with the pharmaceutical companies. So now they've got a profit-driven motive to
Pump out research that makes
promote these drugs,
Right.
not actually test them.
Right.
And
And
so,
when you have a
So
massive
infuriating.
conflict of interest like that,
right.
this is just a broad question. How do you trust the government? Like, genuine question.
Yeah,
And then
I don't know.
our healthcare providers come from these medical schools who are then funded by pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
How do you, what?
The drug companies have so much influence over the FDA, any federal agency, and now the universities, the school, and then continuing medical education. You know, you go to a continuing medical education conference, it's going to be sponsored by all the drug companies that are making drugs
They're
for your
literally
specialty.
going to have tables at the conferences giving away free samples of medications that are new and
Right.
newly FDA approved, right?
Right.
How much does it cost to get FDA approved? A lot of money. $250,000 to get a drug approved previously, probably 10 years ago. It's probably millions of dollars now.
Right.
$1 to $2 million. How is that not a financial interest to
Right.
get your drug
Yeah, well,
approved?
But even in the early development, the NIH is doing most of the early development. So the drug companies really aren't spending as much money on that, because that's one of the things they use as an excuse for why drug costs are so high. Well,
Right.
we have all this R&D for drugs that never come to market. It's like, you're not really investing in that.
Okay, but what about all the commercials that we see of drugs that were FDA approved and they were released anyway, and people started having extreme side effects, and then they're having class action lawsuits?
Right.
The FDA knew that those drugs were going to have those side effects, and you still approved them.
Yeah, and it's all it's all actuarial. I mean, they've got their accountants calculating, is it going to be worth it? One of the things I talk about, and this drives me crazy, is like again, breast cancer is one of the ones that'll come up, and a lot of doctors will say, well, that was the first generation pills from 50 years ago. We don't have to worry about that now. It's like, well, no, we do need to worry about it now.
Yes.
You can't just say, no, that was old studies.
Right.
No, it's like, so like blood clots. So Yaz and Yasmin are two of the most popular brands today.
How many times have you heard those on commercials?
Oh, all
class
the time,
action
right?
lawsuits for yes.
Yeah. So blood clots, I think it was as of January 2016, they had paid out over $2.04 billion to settle over 10,000 blood clot-related lawsuits.
But how much did they make?
It must be enough to worth keeping it on the market,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
They paid out $2.04 billion.
They probably made 10.
And that's fourth generation, newest pills.
But it makes more sense for them to put these drugs out and to handle the lawsuits on the back end than it would be to not approve this drug.
Right. One of the fathers I met whose daughter died from taking birth control pointed out to me that several of the pill manufacturers in their pamphlet say that 1 in 12,000 will die from a blood clot, which sounds like a small number. But if you take a conservative estimate of 15 million women in the United States taking these every day,
Exactly.
that's not a small number anymore.
If not
that's
more,
3 women
man.
every day. It's over 3 women every day.
Isn't it interesting, or is it just me, that there are all these millions of dollars spent in keeping people quiet, pay them off, make them go away.
Yeah.
Nobody does anything. The FDA doesn't get involved. The pharmaceutical, it just keeps pumping this stuff out. Yet we shut our economy down. We force people to take vaccinations that are, and I'm not saying listen, if people are advocates for it, I get it. But at the end of the day, my point is that the death rate for COVID is 0.008%, something like that. You have a 99 point whatever % chance, assuming you're under 80 years old, of surviving.
Assuming you don't have 4 comorbidities.
Yeah.
Right. But
Underlying
yet
conditions.
The government is all behind that and pumping it out and pushing it out and forcing it on people.
Did
But
you know that there were 9 new billionaires created from this pandemic?
Yeah, I did. Did you? It's infuriating. I'm listening to you talk about this. I'm like, that's only representative of 50% of the population, or 48 point whatever. Is it? There's more men than women now, or more women. I can't remember.
There's more women than men.
I just saw the statistic recently.
Yeah.
But let's just say 50% of the population that's going to affect, right?
Right.
And we don't hear anything about it.
No. And they're also not talking about, again, education, right? Boosting your own immune system, things that you can do for yourself, like going outside.
Oh my
getting
gosh,
plenty of
vitamin D.
vitamin C, taking ivermectin
Right.
as a prophylactic, which they've done a study in Mexico where 50% of the case study took ivermectin, did not get COVID. The other 50% that did take ivermectin, that did get COVID, did not die.
Right.
So why? Well, it's
Why are we not
because,
talking about that?
because ivermectin costs pennies to make.
And by the way, if you do talk about it,
Right.
you will be canceled.
Yes.
Right.
You'll be shut down.
Or killed.
and the same thing with the hydroxychloroquine. It's like
I was just going to say that.
part
exactly.
part of getting the emergency use authorization was that there can't be another effective
You
treatment
can't have a
available.
medication that is effective,
Right.
Yeah.
so that they could again pump these pharmaceutical companies so that they can make them billions of dollars
Right.
to create a vaccine at the last minute. That's not FDA approved, which, I mean, I understand that the FDA for some people is like a soft warm blanket. It makes you feel good about yourself, but like they're in bed with these people. So I don't understand why
Right.
it is that you insist on that approval for a vaccine. But it's all money, man.
It's all
Yeah, follow the
money.
money.
Why would we,
Follow the money.
it does not serve them to educate the citizens of the United States, whether it be birth control, COVID, vaccines, medications, diet, supplements. They're not going to educate us
Right.
because educated people do not follow.
Right.
Educated people are not sheep. They start to think for themselves.
Right.
So why would they? Same with birth control. If your obstetrician is telling you, as a mother, say, that it's safe for your 15-year-old to be on birth control, and then she dies from a blood clot, that's not associated. It had nothing to do with it.
Right.
She just died. It was a travesty. Oh, so sad. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why?
Money.
Exactly.
We've established it.
The root of all evil.
So I'm looking at this part to the effect. So everything that you've got listed here, you're saying
Yes,
that
yes, I was gonna do that too.
or that birth control causes these things? Is that what this means?
It's been associated with it.
So it's been associated with, we'll use that
Right.
word since it's safer. It's been associated with migraines, associated with blood clots, as we just established. Diabetes, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As causing?
Yeah.
Type 1, type 2?
Yeah. Which okay. Type 1 is the autoimmune disease.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So type 1.
Okay. Breast cancer, we talked about that. Permanent
Right.
sterilization. We'll come back and you can hit on some of these. Depression, mood disorders, various autoimmune diseases, which I would include lupus, MS, Crohn's, hair loss, thyroid, liver, and gallbladder issues. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and in the beginning of the book, and we can kind of like go through it, I wanted to either like just read the title of the chapter or whatever and go through it. But the biggest thing I think that I took away from it, and the thing that was the most relevant, especially right now, is the studies that they were doing on women in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Where I don't remember how big the case study was, but like 5 women died, and they attempted to cover it up or pretend like it didn't happen, and they weren't informing these people of what they were doing and why they were doing it. And they were basically saying that the women who were getting pregnant, they weren't able to be financially responsible for their children, so they were just going to experiment on these people because they didn't matter, right? And the amount of effect that had, and then they killed these women because of a study,
Right.
and they didn't even inform them that they were performing a study. It's like those who don't know history are deemed to
When was
to
this
repeat
study?
it.
When was this done?
Oh goodness. 60.
I can find it.
65, 64, I think. I
Yeah, it
can't
was
recall what
like-
year it was. But yeah, it was. And you had Catherine McCormick, who was the international harvester heiress, who was helping fund Dr. Pincus's research. And
So this was backed by the deepest pockets in the United States. A group of doctors brought their magic pill to Puerto Rico in 1956,
56.
promising when it would keep them from having children they couldn't support.
Right.
However, the women weren't informed that they were actually participating in a trial for a powerful and under-researched drug, nor were they warned of a potential side effect. And 5 of them died.
5 died. And it came out later, Senator Hubert Humphrey had a subcommittee in the Senate looking at ineptitude at the FDA. And one of the things they uncovered was that the Puerto Rico trial only included 132 women.
That took the medication for 12 months.
12 consecutive months.
Only 132 and 5 died.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And Morton Mintz said this is a scientific scandal, And the funny thing was like just as the subcommittee started to gain traction, Humphrey was selected as a vice presidential candidate. So the subcommittee died, traction ended, and it just kind of went away.
Yeah. We're just going to sweep it under the rug pretending it didn't
I was
happen.
like,
we're not going to talk about that anymore. It's just going to,
The
we're
drug,
done.
however, let's mass produce and pump out to as many teenagers as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fine.
And it's just, it's funny as when I started, kind of going back in and getting ready for the audiobook, I thought the history part was kind of done for me. But then it was funny. So there was another book written called Sweetening the Pill that inspired a documentary that Ricky Lake and Abby Epstein are currently producing.
So pumped for that.
And yeah, me too. And so I flew out to San Francisco and Abby interviewed me and I'm going to be in the documentary. But
that's so cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and they revolutionized birth because they made the
business
of being born.
Right.
It's so trendy now. Women going to birth centers and having their babies without drugs. And it's like we've been empowered again to do what our bodies have been made to do.
Right.
And you'd be surprised by how many the statistics behind women who are having birth center births and relying on their bodies to do what it was made to do from a documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
So imagine what this is going to do for birth control.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. Yeah, I'm excited that they're working on it. I know they've been working on it for several years. But yeah, Abby sent me, they hired their archive producer, I think is the same producer who Michael Moore uses. And so she started digging into this stuff and Abby emailed me just this treasure trove of old articles and stuff they had found. And like the very first one I opened was an article from a feminist magazine called Off Our Backs, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was an article talking about how poor women are being used to promote this drug. And like these feminists were very anti-pill. And it's like, wow, this is amazing to see considering how, what we're sold on now being kind of the women's rights and how
your body, your choice.
If you're against the pill, you're against women, And so it was interesting to read that perspective. But then they mentioned this trial for the birth control pill in the Appalachian Hills of Kentucky, which I was born in Kentucky. I was like, I never heard about this before.
Yeah.
And so started researching that. And so there's a new chapter in the audiobook talking about this trial. But again, it was the same kind of thing. They were doing that right as they were making the pitch to the FDA to try to get it approved. And again, another young, healthy woman who I think was in her early 20s, no medical history at all, had a heart attack and died. But again, they just buried her with no autopsy and just said it wasn't caused by the pill.
It doesn't fit their narrative.
Right. It's amazing that they got away with this.
Yeah, it doesn't support what it is that we're trying to do. It doesn't support what I'm trying to sell.
Well, and it makes you curious, too, about the statistics and how valid they are. How many stories like that are there where there are deaths attributed to birth control that we don't even know about?
Or other drugs that we don't even know about.
I know, I was going to go there. Or that. But,
well, and it's funny because I say that about the Facebook group, and I was joking, but all jokes have some truth, right? Like there was and we keep going back and forth. I don't care, whatever, it's relevant. There was a COVID group in Canada that discussed all the side effects of the COVID vaccine. Well, it was 200,000 people. It was a Facebook group. They deleted it.
Right.
Well, the next day there was 20,000 more people in a new Facebook group.
Right.
And it's the same thing here. Like they can try to suppress the information. People will talk. It's going to get out. You can try and cover it up and whatever. And I actually
they're very successful in covering it up. They've been covering this up for decades.
Well,
close to 100. It's 70 years anyway.
But you have to think about it this way too. We didn't have social media 70 years ago. We didn't have social media 30 years ago. We didn't have social media 20 years ago. What year is this? 2021? Okay, when did Facebook come out? 2005 or 6?
Yeah.
So This is all new.
No, but they control it.
We're strict.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, that's the thing. It's like that we might not have had that back then, but what we also don't have, we still don't have.
Suppression of information.
Exactly. It's like you put something out there that they don't want you to put out
There's
there.
a banner. Or they take it down.
Take it down, and you can't see it.
Instagram took away my captions because I was talking about COVID vaccines.
Dude, you have probably 20 hours, right, to get information out that's contrary or
before
contradictory.
They pull it down.
Yes, before it's gone.
And it's
but
so
even
funny
with that,
now.
They have algorithms to reduce the amount of people who can see it.
And Google. You go the difference between searching on Google and searching on DuckDuckGo.
Yeah.
Mind blowing.
Yeah.
I literally went to DuckDuckGo the other day and looked up COVID vaccine side effects. I looked up the same search on Google. Completely different answers.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like,
do you know my mother-in-law, totally separate again, but I'm just going to say this real quick. My mother-in-law has always been an advocate for the vaccine and has said, make sure you guys get it. And now, do you know what she's saying now? Do not go get it. Ever since she got it, that literally a week after she got the vaccination, she couldn't walk. It affected something in her legs. She's going to the hospital Monday to have some studies done, but it was right after she had the vaccine. And so now she's like, please, you guys don't go get it because we're healthy.
So I have another story about that, actually. A friend of mine reached out to me the other day because I'm like I don't support Big Pharma. I don't support the FDA. I'm definitely a contrarian. You can call me a conspiracy theorist. I'm wearing my tinfoil hat, whatever. Call me whatever you want. I don't care. A friend of mine reached out and she was actually paid out by VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Reaction Court. And she was like, I had the flu shot and I had Guillain-Barré. So she was 19. In college, playing soccer, super fit, doing CrossFit every day. She got the flu shot. She had Guillain-Barré. She lost her ability to walk. Half of her body went paralyzed. And she got a fat payout. But guess who pays for VAERS? We do.
Taxpayers.
Great.
So the pharmaceutical companies are allowed to make billions and billions of dollars off of American citizens. But we have to pay for the mistakes of their mistakes that they make. Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
The biggest thing for me, too, is like, with birth control and the FDA and the government and doctors, et cetera, whatever, it's just like the education that does not come with it. Like at no point in school does anybody talk about our periods or what that means, like what it is that we're supposed to do instead. And I will say that like my mom was not an advocate of birth control, so I never went to an OB or gynecologist in high school and they were like, oh yeah, just get on birth control and you'll be fine. I do remember my friends though doing that.
Yeah.
And their boobs got huge in high school. I'm like, God, I'm so jealous. But like, what are we supposed to do instead?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Mr. Expert.
Well, and we were actually talking about this on a brief little break that I have, and I think I mentioned this earlier while we were recording, is that I have a 25-year-old daughter who has been on birth control since she was 19 years old. I put her on the depot shot once I found out she was sexually active. And then she did put on a ton of weight after she went on that shot. So after about a year and a half, we put her on is it Moderna? Is that what you said?
Mirena.
IUD. The IUD, the 5-year IUD. So I'm listening to all of this and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just freaking me out.
What did I do to my kid?
Right? Like I put her in harm's way and I'm not even an advocate of birth control because of the hormones and I know what it does. But yet at the same time, I have a daughter that I can tell you, but maybe not now, but the last 7 years, she knows the history. Like there's no way that girl was going to be safe and make good choices.
Right.
We would have 4 children right now.
Right.
So
you say we because you would be raising them as well.
So what do you do in situations like that? Like when you have children maybe, or even I have a disabled sister that we had to put her on birth control because, again, there might be multiple.
Yeah, Candy would be a different instance.
So it's like, what are the
for sure
options when you've got individuals that might not control and my gosh, I was a young mom. I had 2 kids by the time I was 20. So I'll throw myself in there. Clearly, I wasn't making good choices.
Yeah.
So what do you do for teenagers and people who are not thinking? They're not making good, sound, rational choices for themselves because their frontal lobe's not completely formed. Like they're just not making good choices.
Yeah.
What are the options?
Yeah, that's a hard call. Like I was saying, I mean, I know one of the things I tried to do was, I laid out kind of my labels in the beginning of the book. Here's who I am.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I want you to know who I am and where I'm coming from. So it's like, if that has any influence on how you perceive what I'm saying, I want you to know ahead of time. I don't want you to read it, believe what I'm saying, and then find out something about me later on and say, oh, that was his agenda.
This is why he has a bias or whatever.
So one of the things I think I did that was probably a disservice to readers is because I am Catholic, it's like, all right, I don't want to focus. The other thing is I wasn't really offering, okay, here's what you can do instead. I don't have a lot of solutions. I'm mostly trying to say,
just be aware.
I want everybody to, we
it's
talk
an
about
eyes wide
informed
open
consent,
thing, yes.
but we're not being informed. So let's make sure people are really informed instead of having doctors like Dr. Rose say, well, this doesn't mean you should stop taking the pill. It's like, no, how about you just tell me the facts and I'll decide if it means I should stop, that kind of thing. So that plus I was afraid if I had too much about fertility awareness, it might look like, okay, this whole book is about trying to promote that. And I didn't want it to be that way at all.
But we're asking.
But you're asking. And I was, honestly, it's another one of those things I was blown away by the number of women who contacted me afterwards and said, why don't you have more?
Well, that was like one of the reviews on Amazon, too. It was like, oh, well, this book just says all the things about birth control. It doesn't say what you're supposed to do instead. Yeah. Like women were pissed or something.
Right.
As if you're not a man.
Like, we're just giving you the information, dude.
Right. And so, and it's hard, and it's like fertility awareness seems to be something that works for a lot more women than I realized it could.
Yeah.
But you're talking about specific circumstances where it's like, it does take work and it does
it's not easy,
right,
for sure. And then I will say, like, just in my own personal journey, like learning the difference between, like, I talked to my cousins about it too, because we've all like been there where we were trying to have kids and stuff like that. And like noticing the different signs of that your body is giving you that you didn't pay attention to before, or, because you were ignorant to them before, you didn't know what they were, like cramping when you ovulate. Or the difference in like water retention or weight retention when you're ovulating. But there's, because I am trying to get pregnant, there's strips that will tell you when you're ovulating.
Oh, okay.
And natural family planning is similar to that. Like you can test when you're in your ovulation window. There's period trackers that you could use that will predict when your ovulation window is. But I think for the questions that you're asking, like your sister and your daughter and stuff, I mean, with Kylie, she would have to know when she's ovulating. And that is a learning curve. Like I had to test, and I still test on when I'm in my ovulation days and when I'm peak fertile.
Yeah.
And for a lot of those women, because you don't know that sperm can last from 3 to 5 days. So, like, just because you didn't have sex when you were ovulating doesn't mean you can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
So, a lot of women who are in the Catholic community or in the crunchy community, they practice NFP, which is natural family planning, and they don't have sex for the week that they ovulate if they're not trying to get pregnant.
Right.
Just because it's not foolproof if you're, like, pulling out or whatever, Right. But your body temperature changes slightly. You have cervical mucus, where you can tell if your body is ovulating or not. And there's disparity between your cervical mucus, where you know the difference between if you're ovulating or not. And then you can use ovulation tests, which is what I've done. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy.
Right.
And
it takes some commitment.
And birth control takes the guesswork out of it, because if you're taking your birth control consistently or you're on an IUD, you don't have to worry about it. There are very few instances where women do get pregnant on birth control, which my grandmother used to make the joke all the time because she was a nurse. She's like, yeah, I've seen babies born with the IUD in their hand. Ha ha ha. But like that's not common, right? But I think if there was more education, and I'll say for me too, I don't drink or use substances or whatever. So anything that's happening with my body, I know, like, oh, that feels different, or I feel different today. It must be this. I must be ovulating. I will say when I'm ovulating, I'm way more, like, I am all over my husband, like all over all the time. And the pheromones that my body is releasing, he's more attracted to me when I'm ovulating, which is like biological. Like you can't really control that. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot of things. And since we haven't been educated on femininity or biology into that level, it's like you have to, it's independent study. You have to teach yourself that stuff.
I think the challenge, that all is wonderful, awesome, exciting, but that is also speaking it's a woman who is married, who is aware and conscious and capable, disciplined, ...
Yeah.
That does not apply to the
everyone.
average, teenager or maybe mentally challenged individual or something like that. So that I think is like, what in the world do you do? Because do you want to sign your kid up for breast cancer and blood clots and
autoimmune disease?
Right? What is the answer? That is a challenge. And I'm not saying you have the answer. I know you don't have the answer because there isn't one, sounds like, but...
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of an indictment on the system as well. Betsy Hartman wrote a really good book called Reproductive Rights and Wrongs. And she talks about, how the system is a reproductive health that takes women's health as a kind of a driving force would look way different than what we have because our system is set up to reduce population as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And to hell with whoever it hurts,
yeah.
Right? So that's why there aren't a lot of options. The whole thing is geared toward reducing population as fast as you can. And for me, that was, in all of my research, that was probably my biggest aha moment or epiphany or mind blow or whatever you want to call it, was reading the Nelson Pill hearings, which just I'm fascinated with. In 1970, Senator Gaylord Nelson held these hearings looking into whether the pill had even been proven safe. And because he's also the father of Earth Day, he started Earth Day in 1970. He was, a conservationist and cared about the earth and was concerned about overpopulation himself.
Right.
I think a lot of these people felt comfortable talking to him about where they stood. It was kind of a wink and a nudge as they testified.
Yeah, okay.
And so you have all of these doctors talking about how it's the first time in history that they shifted the benefit to risk paradigm to get this drug approved. They had always looked at the benefit to risk for the patient. But in this case, they looked at the benefit to society versus the risk to the patient. And Senator Gaylord Nelson hated it. At one point he stopped down the hearings and essentially said, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with the number of doctors I've spoken with who have taken it upon themselves to play Big Brother and say, we can't tell women about the side effects for fear they'll stop taking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. You need to educate and let people make an educated assessment of what is right for them and what's not.
Right.
Just because you don't want people to not take it doesn't mean you don't tell them
right.
what's up.
Well, and I think that if we educated women on all of this, right, from an early age, I think that probably 80 to 90% would not elect to take it. But they're still like, well, what am I supposed to do instead?
Yeah, I listen, as a teen mom, obviously I don't want my kids to have to take something that's potentially life-threatening.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
But as a teen mom, I can tell you right now, I also didn't want my kids to be teen moms.
Right.
That scared the ever-loving crap out of me. That really did. I mean, it was a challenge. It was really hard. And then when you've got, one daughter that struggles with depression and anxiety and other issues, you're like, being a teen mom is not, that's could be potentially life-threatening in another capacity. So it's like... But
you have to weigh these things because also... So here's... we can't even get a good estimate in this country on how many women are taking birth control, right?
It's so many.
It's somewhere between 11 and 18 because we don't have really good tracking systems and everything is so compartmentalized.
They can't track, the prescriptions?
No, because the difference is
But I don't think they want us to know. Because then you can work... So, if you look at Danish studies, which I think are the best because they have national registries where they track all this stuff. So there was a Danish study that came out, and I think it was 2017, that looked at over 1 million women, and they found that women who take birth control are 70% more likely to experience depression, and they're 3 times more likely to commit suicide. So, and this was something that came out in the Nelson Pill hearings in 1970 as well, that women who were on birth control were experiencing more depression, and the depression they were experiencing was more severe. So that's something else we have to take into account.
Yeah,
it's not just physical health; it's mental health.
Yeah,
it's everything.
And I think that's and Barbara Seaman, who wrote the book "Doctor's Case Against the Pill," that was one of her things. She thought that it may actually be suicides that were creating more deaths among young women than breast cancer. She thought suicides and mental health may be the biggest risk.
For those of you who are listening, please like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review, 5 stars only, please. Thank you. If you want to find us, we are on every podcast platform, Spotify, iTunes and on YouTube for video. So, yeah, thank you guys for listening. Bye.